Mom threw me out at 16 but welcomed my sister when she got pregnant in college, and now they want me to give my house to her and her jobless BF who tried to break in with a crowbar. I, 28F, have a complicated relationship with my mom and younger sister Rose, 22F. When I was 16, my mom threw me out of the house for having a boyfriend. Not because I was doing drugs or stealing or anything, just because I was dating someone. She found out I was seeing this guy from school and completely lost it. I wound up crashing on a friend's couch while still going to school. I started working at a local diner, saved every penny I could, and eventually put myself through college. It was rough, but I made it work without any help from my family. I worked morning shifts before school and evening shifts after, plus weekends. I barely had time to sleep, but I managed to graduate and even save a little money. Fast forward to now. I have a good job in finance and bought a small vacation home by the lake a couple years ago. It's nothing fancy, but I worked hard for it, and it means a lot to me. It's where I go on weekends to decompress and feel at peace. I saved for years to afford the down payment, worked overtime, and even took on freelance projects on the side. The house needs work, the kitchen is outdated, the deck needs repairs, and the plumbing is temperamental, but it's mine and I love it. My sister Rose has always been the golden child. When she got pregnant during her sophomore year of college, Mom welcomed her back home with open arms. Rose's boyfriend Joel moved in too. He doesn't work, has zero ambition, and is perfectly content living off my mom. He spends most days playing video games and complaining about how hard it is to find a job in this economy. Meanwhile, Rose dropped out of college and has been hanging around the house doing nothing in particular. Mom pays for everything, their food, clothes, phone bills, doctor appointments, everything. I've kept minimal contact with my family over the years. I still send birthday gifts and holiday cards but don't visit often because every conversation with my mom feels like a reminder that I'm less important than Rose. Whenever I do visit, Mom spends the entire time talking about Rose's achievements, however minor, while completely ignoring anything I've accomplished. It's exhausting and demoralizing, so I usually find an excuse to leave early. Last Sunday, I was enjoying my morning coffee at my lake house when my mom called. I knew something was up because she never calls unless she needs something. After some small talk, she dropped the bombshell: Rose and Joel are getting married, and they need my lake house as a wedding gift because they need somewhere to raise the baby. I nearly choked on my coffee when she said this. The audacity was breathtaking. I asked why she was telling me this, and she straight up said she wanted me to give them my house. When I refused, she called me selfish and said family is supposed to help each other. I reminded her that I was kicked out at 16 and had to figure life out on my own. Her response? That was different because you brought it on yourself. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. According to her logic, having a boyfriend at 16 was a crime deserving of homelessness, but getting pregnant in college and mooching off your parents indefinitely was perfectly acceptable. The conversation got heated quickly. Mom accused me of holding a grudge and punishing Rose for something that wasn't her fault. I told her Rose's choices were her own responsibility and I wasn't sacrificing my stability for her mistakes. I pointed out that Rose and Joel were adults who needed to start acting like it instead of expecting handouts. Mom wasn't having it. She insisted that since I was financially stable and Rose wasn't, it was my duty to help her out. Mom hung up on me, but not before saying she expected me to reconsider. I told her I wouldn't. She threatened to tell the rest of the family how selfish I was being. I told her she could tell them whatever she wanted, but my decision was final. The lake house wasn't up for discussion. Over the next few days, Rose and Joel both started messaging me. Rose said I was cruel and dooming her child to poverty. Joel sent this long text about how he'd always admired me and hoped I'd see the bigger picture. I told them I couldn't believe how cruel they were to bring a child into the world in their condition, much less think of having one. I suggested they focus on getting jobs and saving money instead of trying to take what I had worked for. Then my mom sent me a message listing all the reasons why I owe this to Rose. She went on about how I was successful while Rose just needed help getting back on her feet. She said Rose deserved a fresh start and that the baby needed a stable home environment. She even brought up how Rose had always looked up to me, which was news to me, and how this would be a chance for us to repair our relationship. I didn't respond because I knew it would just make things worse. So Reddit, Ida for refusing to give my lake house to my sister and her now ex-boyfriend? Update, I thought the barrage of calls and messages was bad, but what happened next left me speechless. It was so unexpected and shocking that I still can't wrap my head around it. I just got home from work yesterday, looking forward to heading to my lake house for the weekend when I got a notification from my security app about movement on the property. I installed security cameras after a break-in at a neighboring property last year, and I'm now extremely grateful that I did. I checked the live feed and saw Rose and Joel on my porch. Joel was trying to break in with a crowbar while Rose stood lookout. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Were they seriously trying to break into my house? I called the police. The dispatcher asked for details about the situation, and I explained that family members were attempting to break into my vacation property. She advised me to stay on the line while officers were dispatched to the scene. While waiting for them to arrive, I could hear Rose through the feed telling Joel to hurry before they got caught. Joel snapped back that it was her fault they had to do this because she couldn't convince me to give them the house. When police arrived, Rose and Joel tried to run but were caught before they could get to their car. Rose told the officers it was a misunderstanding and that she thought she had permission to be there. I showed the officers the security footage of Joel clearly trying to break in with a crowbar while Rose kept watch. They arrested Joel for attempted burglary and Rose as an accessory. I gave a statement to the police, providing them with the security footage and explaining the background of the situation. The officers were sympathetic and assured me they would handle it appropriately. Mom called me the next day, furious. She said I overreacted by involving the police and should have laughed it off because they were just kids. I reminded her that Rose was a grown woman about to get married and have a child. I asked how long she was going to keep making excuses for her. Mom accused me of being heartless and said I didn't care about family. I pointed out that Rose and Joel were the ones who escalated things by trying to break into my house. I told her since she likes using the family card so much, maybe she should reconsider calling me family since she cut me out years ago. She hung up on me again. I spent the rest of the day dealing with the aftermath of the incident. I contacted a locksmith to change the locks on the lake house, even though Joel hadn't managed to get in. I also upgraded my security system to include motion sensors and better cameras. I wasn't taking any chances at this point. Update 2, the fallout got worse. Rose stopped contacting me, thankfully, but Mom started calling daily. Her voicemails ranged from crying to yelling. She claimed I was being cruel to Rose during her vulnerable time and that I should drop the charges because family doesn't call the cops on family. I blocked her number after the 5th voicemail, but that didn't stop her. She started calling from different numbers, and I eventually had to screen all my calls. She even showed up at my apartment unannounced. I wasn't expecting visitors, so when I heard the knock, I assumed it was a package delivery. When I opened the door, she immediately started saying I was tearing the family apart. She begged me to drop the charges against Rose and Joel and give them the house. She said they were facing serious legal consequences and it was all my fault for being stubborn. I refused and said I was done being the scapegoat for their poor decisions. That's when Mom said if I didn't do this for Rose, I would regret it for the rest of my life. She said family was all we had and once it was gone forever. She went on about how family should stick together through thick and thin, and how I was choosing material possessions over blood ties. For a second, I wondered if I was being too harsh. The guilt trip was effective, I'll give her that. Then I remembered everything I'd been through, being kicked out at 16, struggling on my own, never getting any help. I asked Mom if she ever regretted kicking me out, she just stammered. I told her family goes both ways and I wasn't going to sacrifice myself for people who were never there for me. I reminded her that she had chosen Rose over me repeatedly, and now she was asking me to give up my hard-earned property for someone who had literally tried to break into it. She left without another word, slamming the door behind her. That night, Rose texted, "You've ruined my life." I was tempted to ignore it but ended up replying that she was ruining her child's life and should consider adoption. I know it was petty, but I was fed up with the blame game. I was tired of being made to feel guilty for protecting myself and my property. Update 3, I was right. Rose took to social media to paint me as the villain. She posted about how I was hoarding a vacation home while she, a struggling mother-to-be, was facing homelessness. She conveniently left out the break-in attempt and their arrests. She made it sound like I was some greedy monster who didn't care about her own family. Her posts were carefully crafted to garner sympathy while painting me in the worst possible light. Her posts were pure drama, teary-eyed photos of her standing outside some small apartment with captions begging for sympathy. She claimed she couldn't believe her own sister would abandon her during such a critical time. She talked about how scared she was about the future and how she just wanted stability for her unborn child. She even mentioned how she had nowhere to go now that Joel was facing legal troubles, implying it was somehow my fault their relationship was strained. The comments were mixed. Some people called her out for airing dirty laundry online, but others, mostly her friends, Joel's friends, and distant relatives, rushed to her defense with the whole family should help each other line. They said I was heartless for not helping my pregnant sister in her time of need. They didn't know the full story, of course, but that didn't stop them from judging me based on Rose's skewed version of events. Mom jumped in too, agreeing with Rose and saying she couldn't believe how cold-hearted I'd become. She commented on every post, adding her own details about how I'd always been difficult and how she had tried her best to make peace between us. She made it sound like I was the problem all along, completely rewriting history to fit her narrative. I tried to ignore it until Rose crossed the line. She posted a picture of my lake house with a caption saying something like, "This is the house my selfish sister is keeping all to herself while I struggle." The photo was clearly taken right before they got arrested during the break-in attempt. People started speculating about the house's location and value in the comments. Some even joked about showing up there to claim it for Rose. The invasion of privacy was outrageous. I felt like my personal space was being violated all over again. That's when I contacted a lawyer. He advised me to file for a restraining order against Rose and Joel, citing the break-in and social media harassment, and to send a cease and desist letter about the posts. He explained that the social media campaign could be considered harassment and defamation, especially since it was inciting others to potentially trespass on my property. He helped me gather all the evidence and file the necessary paperwork. The restraining order was granted quickly given the evidence, but the damage was done. I felt violated. This wasn't just about the house anymore, it was about protecting myself from people with no boundaries. The lawyer assured me that the restraining order would prevent Rose and Joel from coming near me or my property, but warned that it might not stop the social media attacks. He suggested documenting everything in case we needed to take further legal action. Rose finally stopped posting about me online after the restraining order, but then Mom decided to take matters into her own hands. She wasn't bound by the restraining order. She showed up at my lake house unannounced one Saturday morning while I was gardening. I had driven up early that morning to do some yard work and clear my head. I was pulling weeds when I heard a car pull into the driveway. I didn't want to deal with her, but ignoring her would only make things worse. I stood up, brushed the dirt off my hands, and braced myself for another confrontation. Mom immediately launched into how I had destroyed my relationship with Rose and ruined the family's reputation. She went on about how families should stick together, how Rose was struggling, and how I had abandoned her when she needed me most. She called me selfish for hoarding my success while Rose was drowning. She said people in town were talking about our family drama and how heartless I was being. She claimed I was making her look like a bad mother because I wouldn't help my sister. I let her talk until she ran out of steam. Then I told her I wouldn't apologize for protecting what was mine. I reminded her about Rose's break-in attempt, their arrests, and the public humiliation campaign. I asked how any of that was supposed to make me want to help them. I pointed out that their actions had consequences, and they couldn't expect me to just forgive and forget something so serious. Mom waved it off like it was nothing. She said Rose was just desperate and didn't know what else to do. She said I should understand because I was once young and reckless too. She claimed that Rose was under a lot of stress with the pregnancy and that Joel had pressured her into the break-in attempt. She was making excuses again, just like she always did for Rose. That was it. I told Mom there's a big difference between making mistakes and refusing to take accountability. I reminded her that when I was Rose's age, I didn't get handouts or sympathy, I got kicked out for having a boyfriend. I had been working and supporting myself for years by the time I was Rose's age, without any help from my family. I was living on my own, paying my own bills, and building my own future. I hadn't expected anyone to give me anything for free. Mom tried to interrupt, but I kept going. I told her I'd spent years building a life for myself without help from anyone, and I wasn't going to let Rose and Joel take that away just because they couldn't get their act together. I had worked too hard for what I had to simply hand it over to someone who hadn't earned it and didn't appreciate it. I had made sacrifices, delayed gratification, and planned carefully to get where I was. Rose and Joel had done none of that, yet they expected to be rewarded anyway. The conversation got heated. Mom accused me of being bitter and holding grudges. She said I was punishing Rose for something that happened years ago and needed to let it go for the family's sake. She claimed I was being petty and vindictive instead of focusing on what was important, family unity and supporting each other. She said I needed to be the bigger person because I was in a position to help and should do so without conditions or expectations. I told her I was simply standing up for myself for the first time, and if she and Rose couldn't handle that, it wasn't my problem. I suggested she either kick Rose out or give up her own house to them since she was such a doting mother. If she truly believed in sacrificing for family, she could start by making sacrifices herself instead of expecting me to bear the burden. I was done being the only one expected to give while everyone else took. Mom left angry, and I didn't hear from her or Rose for a few days. I tried to get back to my routine, but I knew they weren't done yet. Update 4, the social media attack stopped for a while but then started again. Mutual acquaintances started messaging me, some begging me to reconsider, others sending nasty messages. People I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had opinions about my personal business. Some offered to mediate between me and Rose, while others straight up accused me of being cruel and heartless. I realized staying silent wasn't working. My side of the story wasn't being heard, and Rose's narrative was dominating the conversation. I decided to tell my side of the story. I wrote a post explaining everything: how I was kicked out at 16, how I struggled for years working late nights while finishing high school, and how I eventually built a career that allowed me to buy the lake house. I described the long hours, the sacrifices, and the determination it took to get where I am today. I explained that no one had offered to help me when I was homeless and desperate, yet I had managed to survive and thrive on my own. I then described Rose's situation: getting pregnant in college, dropping out, moving home with her jobless boyfriend, and asking for handouts from everyone while doing nothing to earn trust or respect. I detailed the pattern of entitlement and dependency they had established, with Mom enabling their behavior every step of the way. I pointed out that Rose and Joel had been living rent-free with Mom for years without contributing anything to the household. Finally, I addressed the breaking point: their attempt to break into my house. I included a screenshot of the security footage showing Joel with the crowbar and Rose keeping watch. I made it crystal clear that the lake house was mine, purchased with my money after years of sacrifice. I stated I had no obligation, legal, moral, or otherwise, to hand it over to anyone, especially not to people who treated me like an ATM. I emphasized that their actions were not only entitled but actually criminal, and they were facing legal consequences for their choices, not because of anything I had done. The post gained traction quickly. Comments poured in with support, calling out the entitlement and manipulation I'd experienced. Some shared similar stories about toxic family dynamics, while others offered advice. A few asked why I hadn't gone no contact sooner. Honestly, I didn't have a good answer. Maybe I'd hoped things would improve, or maybe I'd feared the fallout. Maybe I still carried the guilt that had been instilled in me since childhood, the idea that family should come first no matter what. Whatever the reason, I was finally starting to see things clearly. Not everyone was supportive. Some family members suggested I should have kept it private. I told them if they didn't shut up, I'd post their messages next. Part of me felt guilty, but then I remembered how publicly Rose and Mom had campaigned against me. They had chosen to air our dirty laundry first, twisting the facts to serve their narrative. I was simply setting the record straight with the truth. If they didn't like the consequences of their actions being exposed, they shouldn't have acted that way in the first place. Rose reacted immediately, flooding my phone with angry messages about how I'd ruined her reputation and jeopardized her and Joel's future. I wondered what future she was talking about. They had no jobs, no education, no plans beyond living off others. What future was I supposedly ruining? They hadn't been building one to begin with. Their only plan seemed to be taking what I had worked for and calling it theirs. Mom's messages were more pleading than angry. She begged me to take the post down, claiming it would humiliate the family and create irreparable rifts. She said I was airing private matters publicly and making things worse for everyone. She claimed she was only trying to help both her daughters and find a solution that would work for everyone. I told her they brought this on themselves by attacking me while I stayed quiet. I warned her that if they came at me again, I wouldn't hold back. I was done being the family doormat. That evening, a mutual friend called to tell me Rose and Joel were panicking, with Joel threatening to sue me for defamation. I laughed. Everything I wrote was true, and I had evidence. Besides, what money would he sue me with? He couldn't even afford his own place to live, let alone legal fees. The threat was empty, just like everything else about him. It was just another attempt to intimidate me into giving them what they wanted. That night, I felt at peace. I wouldn't be their easy target anymore. For the first time in years, I felt like I was truly standing up for myself. I wasn't going to let them guilt or manipulate me anymore. I wasn't going to sacrifice my needs and boundaries for people who had never shown me the same consideration. It was liberating to finally put my foot down and say enough is enough. Update 5. Last night, my phone rang with Rose's name on the screen. I almost let it go to voicemail but decided to answer, ready for her usual accusations. I had my recorder on, just in case she said something I needed to document for legal purposes. Instead, I heard sobbing, not her usual manipulative tears, but deep, gut-wrenching crying. Before I could ask what was wrong, Rose started wailing that Joel had broken up with her. He'd packed his things and left, blaming her for everything: the backlash from my post, their instability, and the pressure of their upcoming wedding. According to her, he told her she was toxic and he couldn't handle her anymore. He had walked out on her and the baby without a second thought. She kept repeating she didn't know what to do. She was scared and alone and didn't think she could raise a child by herself. She had no job, no savings, and no support system beyond Mom, who was already stretched thin financially. She claimed she had hit rock bottom and didn't see a way forward. She said she was calling me because she had nowhere else to turn. For a moment, I almost felt bad for her. Her pain seemed genuine for once, and the situation with Joel was undeniably difficult. Then my anger resurfaced. I kept my voice steady, but my words came out cold. I wasn't going to be manipulated by her tears or her crisis. I had been through worse at a younger age and had managed without anyone's help. She could do the same. I told her she had no one to blame but herself. She'd chosen to have a baby without any plan, without considering consequences, and with a man who clearly couldn't be a supportive partner. I asked what she'd been thinking. Did she really believe Joel, who couldn't keep a job or take responsibility for himself, would magically become a reliable husband and father? Had she not seen the warning signs that he was unreliable and immature? Had she honestly thought he would step up when the going got tough? She tried to interrupt, but I continued. I reminded her how she'd spent weeks attacking me, trying to guilt me into giving her something I'd worked for. I asked if she'd been in her right mind when she decided to break into my house, when she stood there with Joel thinking it was okay to take what wasn't hers. I pointed out that her current situation was the direct result of her own choices and actions. She had chosen to get pregnant without financial stability. She had chosen to stay with Joel despite his lack of ambition. She had chosen to try to take my house instead of finding her own solution. Her sobbing quieted, replaced by stunned silence. But I wasn't finished. I had years of pent-up frustration to release, and now that I had started, I couldn't stop. She needed to hear the harsh truth that everyone else in her life had been sheltering her from. I told her life isn't a fairy tale where others fix your mistakes. I asked how she planned to care for a child when she couldn't care for herself. Did she think mom would solve all her problems? Or was she still deluded enough to think I'd rescue her despite everything? I suggested she needed to start taking responsibility for her own life and stop expecting others to bail her out every time things got tough. I told her she needed to grow up and face reality instead of living in a fantasy world where everything works out without effort or sacrifice. She finally spoke, her voice weak and trembling, saying I was stone cold and didn't understand how hard her life was or how much pressure she was under. She claimed I couldn't possibly understand what she was going through because I didn't have children and had never been in her position. She said I was being heartless in her moment of need and that she had hoped I would show some compassion despite our differences. I laughed. I told her I knew exactly how hard life could be because I'd lived it. I reminded her how I'd been kicked out at 16 with no safety net and no one to call for help. I had been younger than she was now and completely alone, yet I had survived and thrived. The difference between us was that I'd taken responsibility and made something of myself, while she blamed everyone else for her mistakes. I had faced my challenges head on instead of expecting others to fix them for me. The line went quiet again. I didn't wait for a response. I told her it was time to grow up and hung up. I felt no guilt or doubt. Rose had made her choices and now faced the consequences. It wasn't my job to fix her life. She needed to learn to stand on her own 2 feet, just as I had been forced to do years ago. Maybe this would be the wake-up call she needed to finally start taking responsibility for herself and her child. Update 6. Last night, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. I wasn't expecting anyone, and after everything that had happened, I was wary of surprise visitors. Looking through the peephole, I saw Mom standing there looking disheveled. Her hair was a mess, her clothes were wrinkled, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. I crossed my arms and waited. I wasn't going to make this easy for her. Before she could speak, I stopped her. I told her if she was here to lecture me about Rose or beg me to fix her mess, she should save her breath. I wasn't interested in another round of guilt trips or emotional manipulation. I had made my position clear, and it wasn't going to change. She looked shocked, opening and closing her mouth without words. I didn't let her recover. I unleashed everything I'd held back for years. All the hurt, anger, and resentment that had been building since I was 16 came pouring out. It was like a dam had broken, and I couldn't have stopped it even if I wanted to. I told her she'd been the worst mother I could imagine. I asked how she could kick out a 16-year-old for having a boyfriend, throwing me to the wolves without a second thought. I asked how she slept at night knowing she let me fend for myself as a teenager while Rose got chance after chance without consequences. I reminded her how I had struggled to finish high school while working to support myself, how I had gone to bed hungry more times than I could count because I couldn't afford both food and rent. I asked if she had ever once thought about what I was going through or if she had simply wiped me from her mind as soon as I walked out the door. Her hands trembled as she tried to make excuses about being stressed back then. I cut her off. I told her stress didn't justify abandoning one child while coddling another to the point of enabling destructive behavior. I pointed out how she'd spent years bending over backward for Rose, cleaning up her messes, and now had the audacity to expect me to do the same. I reminded her that she had created this situation by teaching Rose that someone would always be there to fix her problems. She had raised Rose to be dependent and entitled, and now she was dealing with the consequences of her parenting choices. She flinched as my voice rose. I told her I wouldn't be the family's punching bag anymore, and if she thought she could guilt me into it, she was delusional. I was done being the scapegoat, the villain, the one who was expected to sacrifice everything while getting nothing in return. I had built my life without their help, and I wasn't going to let them tear it down now. She finally spoke, weakly saying I was being unfair, that she'd made mistakes but was only trying to keep the family together. She claimed she loved both her daughters equally and wanted to find a solution that would work for everyone. She said she was just trying to be a good mother to both of us in the best way she knew how. I laughed and told her if she wanted a united family, she should have treated her children equally instead of making me the villain while portraying Rose as a helpless victim. I pointed out that her idea of keeping the family together seemed to involve me giving up everything while Rose contributed nothing. That wasn't family, that was exploitation. Real families supported each other reciprocally, not just taking from one to give to another. Her face crumpled, but I felt nothing. I told her this was her mess to deal with, not mine, and if she ever showed up at my door with this nonsense again, I'd report her for harassment. I suggested she focus on helping Rose develop some independence and self-reliance instead of looking for someone else to take care of her. Rose needed to learn to stand on her own 2 feet, and Mom needed to stop enabling her destructive behavior. She tried to protest, saying she was just trying to help Rose. I cut her off and told her it was her problem that she'd only ever helped one child. I wasn't about to let her or Rose tear down what I'd built. I had worked too hard for too long to get where I was, and I wasn't going to sacrifice it all because they couldn't get their act together. She stood there stunned, mouth opening and closing without words. I didn't give her a chance to recover. I slammed the door in her face. "Figure it out like the worthless rats you are," I told her before shutting the door. The words were harsh, but I was past caring. They had pushed me to my breaking point, and I was done playing nice. I know she'll probably tell everyone I'm the villain, but I've decided to go no contact with all of them. I've blocked their numbers, unfriended them on social media, and instructed my lawyer to handle any further communication. I'm tired of the drama, the manipulation, and the entitlement. I deserve peace and stability, and if that means cutting ties with toxic family members, so be it.